I'm a little bit more welcoming everybody else, but that's okay. Well, hello everybody, and I know there'll be some people joining us because we've started right on time, and there'll be a few latecomers coming in. But hi everyone. As Ben said, my name is Kellyanne Jolly, and I'm the chair of Victoria Walks. And I'd like to welcome you. I can't believe it's our 14th supporter event. So we've had a few. But before I do lurch in, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands upon which we are all meeting today. And for me and for many others, not everyone, for many others, it's the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's wonderful that you could all join us for this event, and there's lots of familiar faces that I have seen many times come to our events, and we really appreciate the support. We also really appreciate the leadership that you continue to show in walkable communities. I'd also actually, just before I start, just like to acknowledge our board members who are also joined us today. We have, I think, 4 or 5, Ben, who have registered to participate and to listen today. So I think that's just testament to the value that we place on the supporter program and you and your support that you give us. So I'd like to acknowledge, I can't see everybody on the screen, so I know you're there, so I acknowledge you being here. And I also, of course, acknowledge Michelle and our guest speaker, and Ben will officially welcome Michelle and introduce her just a little later on. We can't talk about, we'd like to thank you to, gosh, I'm a bit tongue-tied this day. I've been a bit sick lately, so I'm just coming back out of the being unwell. I just would like to thank you all for your continued support over many years, and I know some councils have been supporting us through this program pretty much since the beginning. So thank you for your ongoing support and recognition of the value of this program. We can't talk about long-term supporters without mentioning Vic Health, who I think are joining us today too. I can't see yet, but to Shelley and to Caitlin, who are joining us, and then of course Victoria Walks have, Vic Health have been supporting us since the inception of Victoria Walks since 2009. I will get my act together in a minute. We are thrilled to have Michelle with us today, who's from the West Australian Department of Transport as our guest speaker. I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say, and I'm sure all of you are too. And we're going to have some great discussion at the end, and hopefully lots of opportunities for you to share the good work you're doing, but also Michelle, and to ask Michelle questions as well. But before I invite Michelle to speak, or I invite Ben to introduce Michelle, I would just like to take a couple of minutes, which I usually do at these events, just to give you a quick update on some things that have been happening and some work that may be of interest to you. And the first one really is the release today of a report that we've put together called Walking Matters, Key Evidence to Support Council Planning. So it's pretty self-explanatory. We hope you're going to find it useful. And it's really a report which is a collection of I call them like bite-sized facts for people that can quickly draw on to demonstrate the importance of walking, but more importantly, to support an investment in walking, why it's important to invest in walking, whether it's recreational trails or pedestrian infrastructure and everything in between. And it draws on our previous research as well as other sources and data analysis that's been done elsewhere. So it's really a one-stop shop, easy access to evidence for any policy or strategy development you may be doing, or to really help build the case for you in your council. So hopefully you will find that useful. I'm sure the team would appreciate any feedback you have on the resource. And the report, and I recognise that these sort of reports do take a team to pull together, but I would particularly like to acknowledge Joe Eady, and our wonderful volunteer, Amelia Pota, particularly for their work in putting this together, and really with very strict timelines and deadlines to get it ready for you today. And I think it might be in the chat already. Yeah, I can't see Ben, but a link to that, and it's also going to be on our website. So yeah, really excited that we've been able to put that together to help support you in the work that you do. I'd also like to let you know about an event that's coming up on the 20th of July called, it's basically titled Supporting Walking in Rural and Regional Communities. And no, there's a number of rural regional communities online and in our supporter program. And for those who are in our supporter program, you get 30% discount on that. So again, there's another link going in. Yes, I see that. Dwayne's just popped that up, a link to that. So please check that out. And just finally, I do want to do a bit of spruiking, as you do. You may be aware that Victoria Walks is building the consultancy aspect of its work by offering a range of services such as auditing of activity centres for walkability and trails for all abilities access, mapping and promoting recreational walks, behaviour change services, research, policy and strategy development. So a range of different services. And as a charity and a not-for-profit organisation, we are constantly, and particularly as a board, exploring opportunities of how we can keep our organisation and sustain it, to raise funds, to keep Victoria Walks being able to continue the good work that it does. So that's why I'm taking the time to promote it to you. Ben has given me a couple of recent works been doing, just to give you a taste and a flavour if you're not aware of it. We have been lately auditing and mapping all ability access recreational trails for the City of Stonington, delivering an active travel behaviour change program at Alphington Primary School for the City of Yarra, undertaking a walkability audit of the town of Inglewood, and also providing infrastructure and behaviour change advice for Loddon Shire and Healthy Loddon Campaspe. So that's just a bit of a flavour of the types of services that Victoria Walks can offer you through expertise, guidance and support. So again, we'll provide a link to our services in the chat, but really it's probably best if you make contact with Ben and the team to see how we and them can better assist you with the work that you're doing. There we go. I got better at the end, didn't I? Warmed up there, Ben. Having spent 3 days in bed, I haven't had to do much thinking, and that was the first I've had to do. But I will now hand over to Ben to the important part of the session, which is really hearing from Michelle. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, and thank you for coming. I think this is your first event, anything you've spoken with anyone in the last 3 days. I really appreciate it, but understand getting a bit tongue-tied there for a bit, not being used to speaking. So thanks, I'm glad you're back with us. Look, just a short introduction to Michelle, and just to say a couple of things. One, we are recording the event because there's a couple of people who can't get here. And the format we're doing is just Michelle will give a presentation, 20 minutes or so, before we open to a general discussion. Happy if you want to put your hands up, I can moderate and you can ask the questions or put them in the chat. Whatever works for you is totally fine. But anyhow, I'm absolutely rapt to have Michelle with us today. She's the Director of Active Transport and Safety in the Department of Transport in Western Australia, and basically leads a team to help West Australians walk, roll and ride a lot easier. Which I think is obviously fantastic. Michelle's passionate about physical activity, experience in public health, transport planning and behaviour change, and qualifications in social science, business and leadership. And yes, I'm feeling inadequate just hearing that. She's also currently on the board, we were just chatting a moment ago, on the board of Surfing WA. I don't think there's too many transport professionals who are also riding the waves. So I think that's pretty good because I attempt to surf sometimes, but not very well. She's also been on the board member of Australian Women in Sport and Recreation and WA Road Safety Counsellor. She's passionate about outdoors, whether it's ocean swimming or riding bikes, and she's also owned a hiking and tour company in Bhutan. So that's the background to Michelle, but I'm excited because both Michelle and I sit together on Cycling and Walking Australia and New Zealand, which is the forum of all the state agencies and New Zealand and all the walking and bike riding organisations. And I've got to tell, there's a lot of people involved, been involved for a number of years. But particularly when Michelle speaks, I listen because what she says makes a lot of sense to me. She's spot on, and it's the sort of stuff I think, oh God, I wish I'd thought of it that way. So I'm always impressed by what Michelle says. Sorry to embarrass you, Michelle, but it's true. And another reason, obviously, is, what's happening in Victoria at the moment with walking is not very much. So at the moment, really looking for inspiration, what's happening in WA in the creation of walkable, livable communities. And it's really in stark contrast, and it's really very impressive. And I'm sure you're going to be really interested by what Michelle has to say. So, Michelle, I might hand over to you. Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. What a welcome. Look, it's great to be involved in this space. I think we all agree walking and riding is clearly one of the best jobs in the world if you can be involved with promoting it and getting more people active. That's what I've always thought. And look, I've got to give you a bit of a disclaimer up front. A lot of the imagery you'll see in my presentation, there'll be a lot more people riding bikes than there will be walking. And one of the reasons for that is we've recently had a change in our team and the work we do, because we had a cycling team. In fact, for about 7 years, we only had a cycling team, which shows you that there is a long way to go when it comes to walking in Western Australia. But there has been some change, and that we are now have an active transport, a stronger active transport focus, and we have a built environment team, and we have a behaviour change team, and I'll talk through some of that today. So as I was saying just before everyone's joined online, I'm going to talk about what we do from a state government perspective for walking and riding in WA. And then I also want to focus on the Safe Active Streets program, which is something that you may have heard about before. There was recently an Austroads presentation by two of my staff that had over 1,000 registrations, something like 600 viewers mostly from Australia, but across other parts of the world as well. So there's a great link online where you can find out more about the technical aspects as well as the comprehensive evaluation we've undertaken, but I will touch on some of that. And the other thing that I think is really an important part of WA's story is the establishment and the evolution of the town team movement, which I'll talk to as well today. So I think it's not perhaps well known in Victoria as it is in WA, but I'll go through some of that, and I'll also be encouraging people to reach out to find out more about that. So I'll just switch on to my presentation. Here we go. Oh, wrong one. Hang on. Just had it and now it's gone. Hang on.
It did jump up and disappear.
Yeah, it did jump up, didn't it?
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. I'll just find it again. Sorry, folks. I had it all ready to go. Here we go. It's slowly taking its time to open, so apologies. Goodness me, way too slowly for my liking. I'm so sorry, folks.
That's okay. Sometimes these things happen. I'm supposed to do a witty remark now, or a joke or something, but that's not going to happen. It is great to see everyone here too. So look, as Cal said, we really, appreciate your, involvement, your support. Particularly as I mentioned, the state government been really slow. It's just like it is so comforting to know that we have a really active, strong local government sector in particular. It makes such a difference to our work and why we do it, and support of Vic Health too. So it's really great that you can be with us.
That's
But,
fine. Sorry, it is just
that's okay.
typing up.
Oh, that's okay. When it opens, that's fine, Michelle. And the link to Walking Matters, while we're looking, maybe have a quick look at that. But we'll send that. It is on our website at the moment as well. And the seminar that Dwayne's organising for rural and regional, we've got someone from, I forget the town in New Zealand. Dwayne, do you want to jump on while Michelle's getting?
Yeah, thank you.
And just give a bit of an update on what's on the rural and regional seminar, Dwayne? Hopefully you're with us.
Sure. Yeah, so good lineup for the rural and regional seminar. So we've got Liz Beck, who has been working for about 15 years in New Zealand on a range of different transport initiatives in New Plymouth, which is a regional city that was chosen by the New Zealand Transport Agency as a model community for walking and cycling, along with one other in New Zealand. So they've done a whole lot of work both in the infrastructure space around town centre improvements and so on, also recreational infrastructure, like they have a great coastal walkway there, which is in fact a shared path. And they also do behaviour change work. We've also got a presentation from Wonthaggi, the Department of Transport and Planning, and Basco Shire, talking about what they've been doing there. And we've got a state government panel with Andrew Ross from DTMR in Queensland, and Samantha Buckus from Transport Accident Commission here, and Simon Gray from Parks Victoria. So that panel will talk about, well, what's the state government's role in supporting walking in rural and regional communities, and supporting councils to support walking in rural and regional communities. We're going to have one other council case study, but it's probably best that I don't say exactly who I think that's going to be at the moment, just in case things change. But we're definitely going to have one other speaker involved in that event as well. So that'll be a 2-hour online event on Tuesday, the 23rd of July. Yeah, so yeah, check it out in the link at some stage at your leisure, and yeah, encourage everyone who's in a rural and regional council to sign up.
That thing, while Michelle's looking, the other thing is over the last few months we developed, actually a bit longer, a theory of change and our evidence framework. And I wasn't going to put that in the chat today, but I'll pop it in because it might be something that you might be interested in. It's, really about, no, maybe I won't, because it looks like Michelle's got up. So saved from that, trying to fiddle around and find my link. But let's see how we go.
Yeah,
Michelle.
thank you.
Thanks.
Look, I'm going to, can everyone hear me now? Yeah, thank you. Firstly, a big apologies for all of that delay. And now you're going to have to bear with me because my presentation was so large that it can't be shown on screen. So now you're going to bear with me while I go through and open up a couple of different presentations so I can get my points across. So apologies for that delay. We'll just see how we go, but I'm sure everything's top of mind for me and I'll be able to hobble this together okay anyway. So firstly, I'd like to say Kaya, which is our Noongar language for I see you, commonly referred to as hello in Western Australia. I'm standing on the Wajak Noongar Budja near the Derribul Yerrigan, which is the Swan River in Perth, Western Australia. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout all of Western Australia. We have many nations here. And I think particularly in our world of people walking, we have a really unique opportunity to connect to country and have a unique opportunity to have a good opportunity to stand in place and to feel potentially the ancestry and the importance and the gravity of the work that we do and how it relates to cultures both past and present and people both past and present. So thank you. So as I mentioned before, Director of Active Transport within the Department of Transport. We are part of the Urban Mobility Directorate, and I have two teams, Behaviour Change Team and the Built Environment Team. We formerly were the cycling team and the travel behaviour change team. So we've broadened our remit very recently because clearly we're all about walking and riding and creating the built form to support that, as well as scooting and micromobility in those forms, as well as people wheeling in wheelchairs. So we're very aware of the breadth of the work that we do that goes right through from people walking, running and on hiking trails right through to motorised gophers and the gamut of mobility that's in between that. Our behaviour change work, as you'll hear me talk about, is really, we have a strong focus on schools, and that's partly because we don't have the we don't have all the resources in the world, so we've got to focus and prioritise where we can. And schools behaviour change in those early years is a really important part of the picture to enable that we have got the skills to take us through and develop those lifelong habits. Because as we know, when it comes to self-efficacy, it's really important to have a solid understanding and a belief in the ability that you've got the confidence to walk or ride, and that's where we form those habits, is in the early years. So we need to create supportive environments for children. We've recently created an engagement and communications branch in our area, and that's because firstly, we're not really great at telling people what we do, which some people have flagged with us, but also we don't actually own any assets. So our role is really about influence. So in Western Australia, 80% of the network we use for walking and riding is owned by local governments, 20% is by the state government. DOT doesn't really own or doesn't own any of that. So we have to influence the likes of our main roads, Public Transport Authority and all the local governments to really be able to provide that facility to be supporting those behaviours and to be facilitating across. So whether that's creating legible networks across local government boundaries. Okay, one of the things that, and I should have the word draft written all over this, but this has been in motion for the last couple of years, is we're creating the first active travel strategy for Western Australia. So it's dubbed Walk, Wheel, Ride, Thrive, and it reflects this being the first whole of state approach to increasing active travel. And active travel is broader than active transport. And I think this is another quite interesting piece of the work that we do here. It tackles things like cycle tourism, hiking tourism generally for our state, as well as active transport in terms of mode shift. So the broad vision is for Western Australia as a livable, healthy and active place where more people walk, wheel and ride as part of their everyday journeys and experiences. We have three focus areas: people, place and governance. And governance is a critically important piece of the work that we do. We're anticipating that there will be public consultation for this strategy in the next couple of months. There is an election commitment tied to this work. So there was an election commitment for a walking strategy. Now that has then been interpreted by our state as being incorporated within this. So, unlike other states, and it's quite a different approach, and I'm sure there's lots of arguments against that from your perspective, from walking's perspective. But at this point, we see this as an opportunity and an evolution from where we've come from. So I anticipate within the work that we do under this strategy, recognising that we've actually got a bit of a way to go when it comes to walking, that we can be building actions under this over the next 10 years so that we've got, similar to what Queensland's doing, they've got funding and opportunities for walking plans, local network plans, and being able to support that. Western Australia and the state government has got a strong focus on MetroNet in its urban areas. So this is all about public transport, increasing public transport patronage. But in order to do that, we need to make sure we've got really great walkable catchments and able to make those lift and work really well as well. So that's part of that vision. So one of the things that we've done in the last couple of years is within the travel behaviour change area, we have a schools program, and you know, it's great and it's evolved, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. But we really recognise that there needed to be a systems view of the work that we were doing, or that needed to be done in active transport to school, or in that school space, or else we would be continuing just to try to roll out schools programs for the next 5 years or more, you know, for forevermore. But we were coming up against the same roadblocks, excuse the pun, again and again. So we felt that we needed to take a different approach. So we put out a discussion paper. It was around the decline of active travel to schools. The beauty of that work was, because we were developing a discussion paper, we did extensive consultation with numerous stakeholders. Then we put it out to the public, so the minister released it. Then there was additional perspectives that came through that process. So we came out with a really solid you know, position paper around this issue. So we defined the problem quite well. And then we came out with an action plan that had 24 actions associated with it to really unpack this. So when we looked at this, we used the socio-ecological model to try to identify the gaps in the system. So urban environment, we've pretty much recognised that there's gaps in legibility of networks to schools. And then and even to the point where we've located schools, and if you continue to locate schools, are in suboptimal places. You know, looking at policy and regulation aspects, you know, what are the speed zones around schools? You know, how do we get wardens crossing at school? You know, what is the warden approach? What is the, you know, the warrants associated with placing crosswalks? So all of these systemic elements with parts of the puzzle that we've really tried to unpack and try to create some priority around. Individual factors. You know, there's very few service providers that teach children how to ride bikes in Western Australia. There's, you know, and there's no voice for walking, frankly. Under the social aspect, it's that culture and parental permission piece. You know, I'm sure people are aware of, we're seeing evidence now of parents suggesting that other parents who let their children walk and ride to school are actually being irresponsible. So, you know, we're coming into an age where there's stigma associated with walking your kids to school, or children walking to school, because parents are considered irresponsible. So this is, you know, this is the sort of system that we're working within, and we needed to take a different view to try to get a different outcome. So as a result of that, and it being placed as part of our bike riding, as working group within our bike riding reference group, and I don't think I've got a graphic here of our governance, but I might come to that at the end. We have a governance structure that has a ministerially appointed chair, and that is a local member, Chris Talentire, who said, look, this is an issue and we need to get a working group up, which is why, having read the paper, which is why we now have very strong governance around trying to address these issues for active travel to school. And he also, by the way, had, because of his position in Parliament, was able to do a parliamentary inquiry on climate change in schools, of which transport to school was part of that conversation. So again, it's just providing a different lens and perspective on these things, and a way to continue the motivation and the impetus for change. Again, you'll have to be thank you for being gracious, because this is a different presentation to the one I was anticipating to present on. So yeah, this is another piece of the puzzle that we do. This is, you know, events and activities, annual activation program. The town team movement actually was involved with some of these, particularly the open streets work, in association with West Cycle. But this is a part of our business as well. I won't go through this in too much detail, other than to say, in Western Australia, as part of the Metronet project, we've had something like, well, the entire Armidale train line shut down for at least the next 18 months. which is essentially connecting from our CBD out to our eastern suburbs, which is a lower SES part of our city. And you can imagine the transport disruption. It means that we've been tasked with trying to work with the schools and local governments in that area to try to capitalise on this opportunity of, well, people will be walking and riding more, and we want to be able to ease traffic congestion, identify these as different modes so that people can use those for local trips. So yeah, we're working with 14 schools in quite an intensive way in that part of Western Australia. I'll talk, if the slide comes up about our schools program, you'll get more of a flavour of this. However, we've got a website, so it's yourmove.org.au, and this is essentially where in 2016 we might have had 30 schools involved in our Your Move program. We've now got over 270 schools involved, and that's because we've essentially got the same amount of resourcing, but we've taken it online, and we've created a peer-to-peer platform whereby schools undertake activities within their own schools. So they've got school champions and school groups, could be led by a principal, a nurse, parent champion, a school teacher. They form a leadership group to essentially undertake activities in their schools, and then they post them online. So they post them online, and if you notice on this slide, you'll see points awarded, 115 points. We moderate the stories that come up, and then schools get allocated points, which they can redeem at the end of the year, depending on their accreditation level for rewards. And they're all directly aligned to walking and riding, scooting. So it might be, if you're a gold standard school, you might be able to get a grant for a new bike rack or a shelter or wayfinding or these sorts of activities. So it's because we have a really strong digital presence. It's been a critical part of our schools program and schools behaviour change in the state. That's the schools program I was talking to, where we have school champions, schools run activities, they earn points, and then they get rewards. It's a whole of school approach, and we have a vision of getting to 450 schools by the end of 2026. So it's quite a goal, but because there is so much agency for schools, and there's so much self-determination, whether they want to look at active transport from an environmental perspective, from a road safety perspective, from a health perspective, there's different ways that schools can approach this and undertake it. It kind of works really well. And these are some examples of the grants that have been redeemed by these schools. So we're seeing, new bike shelters, constable care, which is, learn to ride kinds of activities where they're off-site, and this sort of thing. The other piece of work that we do in our behaviour change team, which runs across both my areas, is comprehensive evaluation. So I'll have to flip into another presentation about the Safe Active Streets program, but over the last 4 years, we've taken a very strong approach to the evaluation of our projects. I came from a public health background, and clearly everything we do in the health space is evaluated to the nth degree, because we need to justify what we're doing to get the funds going forward. So when I came into the world of transport, I was just quite surprised that it just seemed to be a lot of money available to do projects, and there just wasn't the same focus on evaluation that I was used to seeing. And I just thought, but how do we know we're doing the right thing? Or how do we know that we're getting the outcomes that we're seeking? So we've, particularly with the Safe Active Streets program, we've undertaken quantitative and qualitative evaluation. And this is quite an interesting approach, because each project is quite different. So we've had to undertake evaluation of the different projects, but then we've had to evaluate the program and how these projects, where those similarities were, and what can we learn against the entire program, and what's the whole transport system impact of it all. So it's been a really interesting approach. The other thing that we've done is our Principal Shared Path program, where we get $20 million a year to fill gaps within 15 kilometres of the CBD. So this is our primary routes. These are, if you ever come to Perth, these are our really primary route, strong infrastructure, fully lit, 4 metres wide, you know, great infrastructure for riding as in a arterial way to the a radial way to the city. But again, we were given $20 million. We're given $20 million a year, but then we were told to evaluate it, and this has never been done before. So we've done really comprehensive evaluation, not only looking at numbers and speeds, but has there been any impact on the aligned transport network because we've now built this infrastructure? Is there a claim which is, oh yeah, we've got all these great riders on this network, but we've actually pinched it from another part of the network? So we've done this really comprehensive evaluation. We've also looked at you know, local residents, the qualitative aspect. Do they find this effective? Do they find this efficient? What do they think about it? And I think some of that qualitative side, which we've really tried to push when it comes to walking and cycling, is where we're changing some of that perception around the work that we do, because that's traditionally not been a transport evaluation space. But it's getting a lot of traction with local governments and some of our other colleagues across Main Roads and PTA who are also appreciating this different perspective. Okay, network monitoring and reporting. Again, we're strong focus around understanding the trends and the numbers that we're getting on the network to identify how things are going with what we're building. And we're also doing some research and involved with Curtin and the Telethon Kids Institute in Western Australia around e-ridables on the transport task for WA. In Western Australia, it is legal to have them as a personal device. We don't have as many e-ridable service providers. Have some, but not as many as other states. But we are just trying. We see that as a valuable part of the transport task, but it's just we just have scant information. We see all the headlines with, you know, scooter injury and lithium-ion battery fires, but we're not seeing the comprehensive understanding of, well, who's using it, what trips are being done, what is the potential, have other trips been changed as a result. So we're trying to just interrogate this further so we've got some better understanding. They only became legal in, I think it was 2020 in Perth. The TREC study, this was actually a repeat piece of work from a project that Billy Giles Cortai and Gina Trapp and Hayley Christensen did in UWA about 15 years ago. So we're repeating this because we wanted to see if there's any change. So much has happened over the last 20 or 30 years. So we just, we're really keen to see what the results are of this. So we've got some outcomes associated with that too. The work we do in the built environment team in terms of our network planning and prioritisation. So we have a long-term cycle network for Perth and Peel. We also have regional long-term cycling networks. Now, I'm conscious I'm using the word cycling again a lot. These will perform functions associated with active transport generally. Or clearly, the walking trip will be a smaller trip, but still, it just provides that connectivity across regional government boundaries, as well as helps to assist in decision making around where we can prioritise infrastructure funding and delivery. So this is also the basis for which we are currently developing our Stage 2 business case for Infrastructure Australia. Our Stage 1 was accepted about 18 months ago. So we're now building the case for Stage 2, which really identifies where all the gaps are and where we need to prioritise our funding. And if you can imagine this piece of work with all its dashes and its dots, and the straight lines indicate those that are completed and of suitable standard. The thinner completed lines indicate they are substandard. The dashed lines indicate they are there but of poor quality, and the dotted lines suggest that they're missing. The red lines are our primary, blue, secondary, and green local. So we have got, just in primary and secondary routes alone, we've got thousands of gaps. So this was quite a task, and it required consultation with all the local governments and agreement across different boundaries. It was a 2-year project. So, but again, it's been that pivotal piece for us to then go, okay, if we now know what the agreed network is, how do we then identify where, then we need to understand the gaps. What is the value of those gaps? How do we then identify where we need certain priority projects? So it's been a fundamental piece for us, and will be a fundamental piece for us in hopefully seeking federal government funding in this space. Design guidance, following an Attorney General's report into safe and viable cycling in 2015, it was a clear issue that there was not any consistent guidance for our local government partners on how to and where to be providing paths and other active transport contextual guidance and guidance for the network. So we have been on a mission to create this. The most recent one we launched in December last year, which is our contextual guidance. It's contextual guidance for all ages and abilities network planning. So this is really the piece that it's the strategic work that sits across all of the rest of the planning and design guidance in that green column you can see. Local bike planning we will have completed by the end of this financial year, and we also have got some interim safe active street guidance which will be available by 30th of June as well. So the contextual guidance is one we're really quite proud about and excited about, because it really looks at design principles and a level of service that we should be looking for different users of the network, depending on their confidence and ability. And it also assists planners and designers with what facility to choose depending upon what level of service you're trying to achieve. So yeah, I encourage people to have a look at that if that's relevant for them as well. Others might have this in their own jurisdictions, but we have got an active transport infrastructure policy where it took us years, believe it or not, to work with Main Roads and Public Transport Authority to develop this. It's an evolution of the positive provisioning policy, whereby major projects will have a path network associated with them when they're built from a roads perspective. But we've really emphasised this all ages and abilities, and we've really emphasised this need for connection, alignment with the long-term cycle network, which we hadn't built, we hadn't created prior to this. So this has really helped for some of our, I guess, institutional decision makers to understand the importance and the decision-making priority for active transport within the system. Talk to some of this. So another focus that we have within the built environment team is the network development work. The bottom picture I just put up looks at that prioritisation of the network. So the long-term cycle network stage 2 business case. So in other words, that's where we're heading. So we're just seeking that funding to then deliver. The image above it, quite interestingly, this just indicates some of the work, the pre-feasibility work that we undertook as the Department of Transport for the Causeway Bridge. Now, my personal story with this is I was in the role a couple of months, well, probably, no, more than a couple of months, probably about 12 to 18 months. And there was this concept of a bridge or a conversation around this bridge going across adjacent to Perth's Causeway. This is right in the heart of the city. And apparently there had been some fatalities on this particular part by people that ride. It's a very congested area to walk across, essentially a 4-lane bridge with 4 lanes of cars and a tiny slab path, which is navigated by people riding their way to work, people navigating the river for a nice tour around the river. Long story short, This had been identified as a problem since 1975. This was the year I was born. And I went, hang on, why has nothing been done about this? Surely there's got to be something that's we've got to be doing something in this space. So we undertook some early planning work, and we were very keen to make sure that this had early engagement with the Aboriginal elders of this area, because it was quite a contentious space. Matagara Island, colonially known as Harrison Island, was quite politically sensitive and of great significance to Aboriginal people. So long story short, we went ahead and did some early consultation. We did some early design work. Then came that opportunistic moment when the word from above came through, is that, have you got anything that we can be showing that is a bridge across the river? And then we were able to show this imagery. And then, of course, the Premier and others liked it. And then it suddenly became a project. Now, we hadn't done as much feasibility on it as we would have liked, and we know now that we would do. But long story short, we've now got what is going to be a $140 million active transport bridge connecting across to the CBD in Perth. That's going to have separation for people walking and riding. It's going to be recognised by Aboriginal, first owners, and have great cultural significance. It's got a boomerang that you can see there, and it's going to have digging sticks on the other side. So through it, I guess what I'm saying is that our role in terms of early development and early involvement is seeing some really positive outcomes for people walking and riding and being opportunistic. So I mentioned our role is influence. We don't own any network. We do that. I mentioned our Principal Shared Path program to complete the network within the CBD. That is funding for the state government to deliver the primary network. We also have, sorry, I'm just looking through these, the WA Bicycle Network Grant Program. So this is where we've recently got $8 million annually, which is split across metro and regional areas, and it's always oversubscribed. This is where we do a 50-50 grants program with local government. So in 23-24, there was 37 LGAs, 47 projects, and 28 kilometres constructed. Now, prior to 2017, it had like $2 million a year, split regional and metro. It really was not getting very far. And I only see this amount increasing because, as you can imagine, costs have all increased in recent years. The need, as you've seen earlier, is only increasingly stronger. We still, whilst WA is doing well, it still needs so much more money to deliver and get the outcomes that we need for the state that we want. So it's a constant, never-ending ask, but we will continue to do what we can to deliver that network. But we can't do it without our partners in local government. And we really recognise that their efforts and intent is what we try to work with to get that outcome where we can. Okay, so that was one slide deck. Has anyone got any questions whilst I try to find my other slide deck about the Safe Active Streets program?
I was just going to ask about the Safe Active Streets program, so that's very timely. But yeah, particularly interesting because I think the intersection with walking is greater there. Yeah. So that's great. While you're looking for that, Michelle, I just might point out to everyone, looking at Michelle's graph of the funding for active transport, you saw how it went up to 350. If you do that by 350 million each year, if you do that by Victoria's population, that would be equivalent of 815 million for this year alone. So you think about, and that's been building up year after year. So it's a phenomenal difference for what we've got here. We do get TAC funding, but we don't have central transport budget for active transport. So it's a massive, massive difference, and very, very jealous.
Yeah, and look, I should clarify that. So we're getting around, over the next forward estimates, it's 240 million over the next 4 years. And look, some of this is that you just heard me talk about that Causeway Bridge. I mean, we do include that in the figure. So that's like one piece of infrastructure, $140 million. Yeah. So look, I would like to see, this is taking my DOT hat off, but we need to see more funding go through to local governments. There is a need for the major infrastructure projects that come through, absolutely. but we know and can see the greatest need being funding that is through local governments. And, you know, as much as we can try to seek that funding through the federal government from a state perspective, the feds might actually have a better opportunity to fund that within local governments as well. So anyway, it's going to be a collective, but we've still got to all work together. At the end of the day, I don't care where the money comes from. We've just got to get it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Michelle, I'll just give you an eye on time. So it'd be good to get to some questions in a bit. So do you want to do the Safe
I'll be
Active
really
Streets
quick.
first? Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'll be.
Okay.
Can you see this? Can you see the Safe Active Streets journey?
No, we've just got the thank you at the moment for the other one.
Apologies. Okay, sorry. I thought that was coming off. Okay. I don't know why that's not coming up. Sorry, hang on. Here we go. Can you see that now?
Yes. Great.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Okay. Okay. So Safe Active Streets, I'll be really quick. Our Safe Active Streets, it was an opportunistic, it was opportunistically commenced in 2015. My former boss, Craig Wooldridge, was invited to go through WeRide to the Netherlands and come up with different innovations around encouraging active travel in various jurisdictions. From there, he invited some Dutch experts out. There was a big Imagineering workshop undertaken. Again, opportunistically, the minister came. He was a bike rider. The next thing you know, he's put his hand in his pocket, $3 million a year for 5 years. So it was right place, right time with the right knowledge. So there was a bit of scramble to start with, and you heard me talk about the evaluation and our comprehensive approach. Well, yes, the intention was to evaluate it, but admittedly, we were 2 years into the project when we established really the evaluation approach to what we were doing. So this is totally playing catch up, but it doesn't matter because we did catch up, and now this pilot project saw 12 projects being built, 9 of them evaluated. So what we're talking about is Safe Active Streets have vehicle that are identified on routes to prioritise active travel, so people walking and riding. They usually have 1,500 vehicles per day or less. They are meant to address existing physical barriers. It's all about improving connectivity to local trip attractors. And then most importantly, we're trying to create a 30-kilometre-hour shared space. Part of this journey, which we've seen, and that it's really one of the reflections that I've had is this whole piece of work around the Safe Active Streets program and encouraging this discussion and work with engineers around designing down to a 30-kilometre-hour speed. It's then had ripple conversations around speeds around schools, speeds around networks, speeds around local government areas. It's really been able to pave the way in the community acceptability for lower speeds. We're not there yet, but it's starting to engender this conversation. So we are trying to connect people to destinations. You can see some of this information here. It's all about short local trips. In our long-term cycle network, we would see Safe Active Streets as performing more of a local function. As I mentioned before, we're talking about quiet local roads, There's logical connections to trip attractors, school shops. Every safe actor street that we have built has had a school alongside it. And we've seen some great results as a result of that. We try to create natural landscaping. We try to increase green canopy on those streets because it creates shade and rest and an enjoyable experience as well. We're seeing less vehicle traffic, slower vehicle speeds. We all know the other benefits: public health, livability, and community interactions. One of the other key takeouts from this program has been the phraseology and the language you use. So in the early days, they were called bike boulevards. That, of course, resulted in fear of pelotons riding down roads. The use of the word cyclists engenders a certain thing. We're very much talking about safe, active streets where people are essentially reclaiming the streets. We want kids to be able to play in there. One of my greatest joys I ever saw was walking down the Leek Street Safe Active Street in Bayswater and seeing children's chalk all over the road because the streets were that bare and kids were able to reclaim that space and, you know, be able to use Merry Christmas in chalk on the actual road. So I guess it's just that idea of creating spaces where people can be and claim. So these are some of our completed projects over the year. The pilot project has finished late last year with the opening of the Cambridge Ruislip Street project. We have got our final evaluation coming out in the middle of the year with some design guidance, interim guidance also coming out by the 30th of June, as I mentioned before. The funding for this is now built into our WA Bicycle Network grants program. So now we're seeing quite a few local governments, because we've got different projects, we've tested and trialled different things. We're seeing local governments now seeking to design this within their own networks, which is what we always wanted to see. And that just gives you an indication of where some of those safe active streets are being located. That's the image in the middle. And there's one also in a regional area, which won an IPRIA award at the last state IPRIA awards as well. I'm going to go through quickly some of the design features for the technicians out there. We have entry statements. And look, these are some of the design features, and not on all of them. One of the big takeouts that we have, if there is a treatment every 80 to 100 metres, plus we have a narrowing of the road and embayed parking, they're kind of the three key elements that results in the positive outcomes that we see. And I'll go through those positive outcomes in terms of the evaluation shortly. But these are some of the treatments that we use for safe active streets. I'll also flag that one of the learnings that we did was the first Safe Active Streets project that we did, I will say, it was like gold plated. It had all of the bells and whistles. It was expensive over time. And that was because there was such community outcry and this was so new. We needed to really demonstrate how things, we needed to ease the community gently through this. As time's gone on, we've been able to change that approach, and it's not everything is gold plated, because we need to find that middle ground of where's the best bang for the buck for the money, so that we can get the outcomes plus meet the objectives of the program. So these are some other examples that you'll see. Raised plateaus at intersections are definitely one of the things that we're doing here as well. But you can see there's all different sorts of treatments and features as part of the Safe Active Streets program. So you heard me talk before about the evaluation. I can send some of this through because I know that this might interest some more than others, but we're talking evaluation of the design features, the user behaviour, as well as community sentiment. All of these interim evaluation reports are available on the DOT website. So these are for each individual project. So I encourage people to have a look at those. If people have got specific questions, I can also put you in contact with people in my team if I can't answer them today. This is of the program, this is what we're saying. Every project showed evidence of reduced vehicle traffic counts, which is like winning. vehicle counts have decreased by 22%, vehicle speeds by 15%. Now, you'll see that the 85th percentile speed is not 30 k's yet, it's 38.8, but still that reduction is really positive. So, you know, more treatments could be made if the goal was for 30. But again, these are all posted. These are all signed 30 k's. And I think that's an important thing to note as well. We've seen increases in people walking, increases in bike riding. And interestingly, that more movement and activity is also observed on nearby streets. So that's an important part of this as well, which we weren't expecting, to be honest. So that's really great to see. It's that change in the community. We've got more people identifying as those that would be able to be more comfortable on the street because of these safe, active streets, which we want to see. And I won't. Oh, the other thing that was quite interesting was there's varying levels of feedback. So some people felt positive about safe, active streets. Some aspects weren't as well favoured. However, they're not directly compatible, meaning those, just because someone didn't like it didn't mean that it didn't work. And in fact, when I've reflected on these in terms of the elements that people didn't like, narrowness of the road, I can imagine that people don't like the narrowness of the road or the confusion on the right of way, but it's actually that very element which causes people to slow down. When it's confusing and people aren't aware or it's not familiar, that's actually causes people to be more cautious and slow down. So it's an interesting take on the work that we do. So perceptions were mixed, but we also know that they changed over time. So those that were vocally against it in the early stages of some of our projects actually came to like it. We know that on most of our projects. So that bike lash is, or just, you know, community lash is, we can mitigate that over time. They generally change to a positive sentiment. I think that's where town team movement can come in really well here as well, because, and I believe this has occurred in New Zealand, being able to bring the community on the journey and have them co-design and be involved is actually one of the was potentially a critical success factor for these sorts of projects. So I think there's a great space for that in WA, and we'll be interested to see how that works going forward. Okay, so
Michelle, should we go to some questions to give your voice a
yes,
rest of the
please.
discussion as well too? Some sort of
yeah,
it's a hard gig for you. I've got a sort of couple of questions myself. I'm just wondering if people have got particular questions or anything I'd like to ask Michelle in reflection of what she's spoken about, or more generally what's happening in WA. Joe Eady, you've got a question there.
Hi, Michelle, thanks for that. That's really interesting to hear what you guys are doing as part of that safe, active streets and seeing how effective it is. I was quite interested when you talked about, you know, the introduction of the 30k speed zones. What additional activities were happening? Like, for example, was it policed, or was it you just tell people, oh, we're this is going to become 30, and then sort of see what the response is? I'm just interested to know how you did that.
Yeah, sure. So look, when it came to, so firstly they were posted. So, and look, there's so much underneath this, as in when we first designed these safe, active streets, we had independent road safety auditors and designers assist with this and run, and this was all in collaboration with local governments, I should say. So it's not just the state saying this, it's we did this in collaboration with local governments. We did the design, there was community consultation. We had third parties to test it and to, you know, verify the design. Then it was, you know, so all the consultation was undertaken by local governments. They were signed, of course, Main Roads, being the Lines and Signs Authority, had to approve the design before they put the signs up. There was a lot to learn along the way. So, for example, at intersecting roads, we learnt to put 30 symbols on the road coming into the safe, active street. On some of the projects, if we weren't seeing compliance with 30Ks, we did ring our mates at WA Police and say, can you please have a look at this? Can you go down there and, just do some education or, get the speedo up, etc. So we definitely did do some of that. But again, I'm only very disappointed that I haven't, sorry. Ooh, only disappointed, sorry about that. I'm only disappointed that I can't get you my other presentation because I have my governance structure. WA Police, DPLH, everyone else involved in active travel is part of our governance committee. So we have really strong governance in Western Australia. So everyone's engaged and looped in. So yeah, I could ring my mates at the cops and say, hey, can you come and have a look at this? Oh, can you send some police traffic down there, particularly during school? There was concerns at school drop-off on some of our, Leak Street, Safe Active Street. So yeah, they were able to help out. Has that answered your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I was just remarking about, Michelle, to give local context here, Victoria, for Yarra's 30K trial in Fitzroy and Collingwood, the police were part of the state government's road safety alliance, but our commissioner came out on top and was saying it was absolutely ridiculous and it won't be policed and all this sort of stuff. So good work that you're able to achieve that, but our commissioner was just not on board with the rest of the government's road safety alliance. I've got one question which has been sent to me from Anna at Queensland Walks, and she's just got regarding the recent announcement of federal funding for active transport, 100 million. In your wisdom, what would you recommend, say, I guess the state walking organisations, we don't have a national one, can do to ensure walking projects are funded? Because cycling projects are easier to spend, they're generally sexier, you can cut ribbons with them, and they don't always help walking. So just interested in your thoughts about how can we get walking as part of those projects, walking specific. If you've got any suggestions.
I do have a couple of suggestions. Firstly, there is also a consultation that's just been released a couple of days ago by the Australian government around decarbonisation, transport and decarbonisation. So that's definitely something for you guys to comment on, either individually or, collectively, however it rolls. The thing with walking and the federal government and that funding, if you can be looking at connections to train stations, connections to optimise public transport infrastructure, that's where you'll get, that's where I think the opportunity is.
That's a really good point. That makes a lot of sense. So
because the federal government will fund roads and rail, and they want to do decongestion on freight routes. They want less cars on those routes, so they want to support public transport, but you need people to walk to those precincts. So that's what I think, and it's pretty cost effective to improve walking connections, as well as, all the stuff that doesn't cost much, but if you do it at its scale can create great outcomes. And I would suggest, much like we did with the Safe Active Streets program, is if you can be doing some trials, get a little bit of money, prove it, and then identify where the funding, how it could impact on a wider scale. I think that's where some opportunities are.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. Kathy, got a question.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Michelle. Great presentation. My question's not dissimilar to Joe's. It's in relation to the 30 kilometres. Quite fixated on that because while we have some local governments here, as Ben touched on, who are happy to support 30 kilometres, the politicians aren't. So we have this kind of, you're the bureaucracy there and you're advocating. How did you get the politicians on board with this? Because it doesn't matter. We've got the local streets where councils are trying to do their best to do this, and then, it gets unpicked as quickly as it gets done because we're still fixated on having 40 and that 30 is not possible.
Okay, so this is where I want to tell you about the town team movement. Yeah. So I'm just gonna have to wing it while I talk about this, and I'm not going to bother to try and find my slides. So, okay, so. Two things. I'm assuming that there's a different perspective about 30 km an hour with inner councils than it is with outer councils, right?
Correct.
So
Although we have got Mildura's got a big trial in its CBD, and Warrnambool, they've got officers from Warrnambool in the meeting here. Their main shopping drag of Liebig Street, 850 metres, is entirely 30k, and that's the most impressive thing I've seen anywhere in a regional area in Victoria. So yes, in the inner, but the two, apart from Yarra's example, the two other ones which are really working are there.
Okay, so a lot of this has been community led. So in regional Western Australia recently, a lot of the towns, not a lot of these, sorry, I should say that there's been numerous towns that have lobbied hard for 40-kilometre-hour coming into the town, because a lot of them are on major highways or, you know, roadways or freight routes, etc. And there has been, you know, there's been deaths, and they've been able to argue for we need to have 40 kilometres in our high street. In Metro, one of our councils, Town of Vincent, again, came from the community, well, came from some local government councillors. Then they did a trial. They did a trial for 40 kilometres an hour, post with signs, without signs. They did all the evaluation, as in vehicle counts, numbers, and qualitative evaluation from the community. We made sure that they collected walking and cycling numbers, because you want to see if there's been a shift or not. Now they've got approval from Main Roads to do a precinct-wide 40-kilometre-hour in their local government area, which again, that's been a little unheard of. So I think that there has been some thawing inside. Well, there was a Main Roads speed zone policy change, which has opened that up, and it came from a road safety perspective. So there's that. Then there's the other town team movement. So the other thing that, look, and I think that a lot of the bureaucrats will agree, we all want reduced road speeds, but like you've said, the political sensitivities around it are such that who wants to be that government that drops the default speeds? Now, the thing with the town team movement is this, so I need to explain what it is, and I encourage everyone to jump on their website. The town team movement talks about a positive group of doers, and these are just community volunteers that want to see some more vibrancy in their community. They want to see the coffee shops being used. They want to see a bit more artwork around. They want to connect with each other in by doing civil good, and they want to work alongside local governments to do that. So they have a charter, and the charter is they are not political. They work with, they're positive, and it's about creating action and doing. So they're all volunteer based. Some of them will run markets. Some of them will, have street parties, or, do all sorts of different things. It's very community driven, depending on who's involved and how they want to do it. The town team movement itself, and Jimmy McGregor was recognised because over the last 4 years, there is now 100 town teams across Metro and regional Western Australia, and he became the local hero. So, when the Australia Day Awards and they state-based, he became the local hero for Western Australia. He's a former councillor, not a councillor anymore. I think he was a former event organiser, and the co-founder is Dean Cracknell, who's a planner who's now based in Hobart, but he was based in Perth. So they create an understory, not an umbrella, but they are the understory and support for these town team groups. So it's such that about 3 months ago, such as the groundswell of this understanding where these positive groups are engaging so well with local governments and doing stuff, not in against them, but it's like co-creation and placemaking is essentially what they're doing, but co-creation because they're doing it community-led and in partnership with local governments. So local governments can come to them and say, hey, we're doing this, what do you think? And then they might get involved, or they might give them $2,000 to, support the coffee shop that they're doing and the kids art program they're doing or what have you, but it's all about place. 2 months ago, Main Roads has given them $5 million over the next 5 years for Streets Alive. So if you have a look at Streets Alive on their website, this is $5,000 seed funding available for these groups. As long as you could be a P&C, you could be a town team movement, you could be a men's shed. It's all about, and I'm just so disappointed I don't have it in front of me, but the objectives are about encouraging, reducing speeds and communicating that importance of people over cars in the community as one objective. The need to work in collaboration with local government to do that. So then after that, there'll be, there's like $100,000, there's a second grant round for $100,000. So Town Team has now evolved to have community builders. So there's essentially like your point person. There's about 5 or 6 across Western Australia where these town teams can go and have a chat to them and figure out how they do their grant applications, or, how do they continue motivation of these volunteers. They're really grassroots, community-driven supports, which can basically be that voice of positivity in our communities. So when we start to talk about things like reducing road speeds, they'll potentially be on board because we're talking about, everyone's got the right to be able to walk safely to their local town, to their, high street, be able to go and get a coffee, be able to talk, it just creates that civilness amongst our communities.
Thanks,
I think Jimmy Murphy needs to come and give you guys another presentation.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's a good tip, Michelle. I'm sort of thinking that. Dwayne, you've got a question there. You're on mute. Still.
Sorry, yeah, I was just writing down that name, Jimmy Murphy. Sounds like a very interesting guy. I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you actually, but I'll pick one. Because I think it sort of is quite broadly applicable actually to a range of different stuff. But you mentioned landscaping and that was part of the Safe Active Streets work, maybe some other stuff as well. And we've heard from other people in the past that the success of projects is actually surprisingly strongly related to the aesthetics, whether it looks good or not. So I'm just wondering about that, what your experience is with, how important is it to make things pretty and to, involve landscaping and trees and so on?
Okay, it's a really good point. I mean, it has its role, but I wouldn't say that's the key driver. That's just, for a lot of our projects. And it's also hard when you're planting a tree that is, the tube stock is only a certain height, yet, we know it's going to grow into a certain height later. But that whole idea of greening is really a hot topic in Western Australia at the moment, and it's only going to get, bigger. So it's not beautifying but in the same space, if you're talking beautification broader than just greening, it's like artwork, etc. We do engage where we can as part of our activation, the kids to be able to paint underpasses and that sort of activity, but it's not part of our sell as much. That said, because trees are a hot topic and it's trying to mitigate our awful conditions that we have here at the moment and will continue to do so. We take the point of, if there is some community concern around tree loss or community interest in trees, we will happily, pay for that as part of our projects, pay an additional amount of, if we take a tree, we'll replace it with 3. One of our projects is a green root project, which you can see on our website. There was one particular community that was quite concerned about some tree loss, felt very not heard, if I can be blunt, and we were able to work with them and had a great successful project. that had a lot of community consultation involvement because of how we engaged over trees, how we engaged over the local ecology and got students and others involved. So our urban tree canopy in WA and in Perth is really on the low side. It's become a state priority. What we would like to see is all of our primary and secondary routes in WA to be basically become, our green routes, green travel routes for shade and for cooling. But yeah, it kind of doesn't answer your question, but yeah, it's an important part of the puzzle.
Thanks.
We've got about 5 minutes or so for maybe one more question before we finish, but I might, if someone's thinking of a question, I might ask you just a question, Michelle, in the meantime. I do know from some of our council colleagues about 30K, a concern that if we do have 30K and we're reducing volumes and speeds is what we want, but whether there's a displacement, because there's people coming back and saying, well, it just means people are going faster or more vehicles. What have you found in WA?
Well, that was one of the findings that I was quite surprised by. We didn't see that displacement occur for the trips on the local roads. So with our Safe Active Streets program, we saw an increase in walking and cycling on the streets that were around it. Again, we weren't expecting that. We did expect to see an increased number of vehicles on, the main distributor roads, which, because what we're trying to do is reduce rat running by having these Safe Active Streets as well. So I don't believe our evaluation looked at the numbers on those local distributors, but I know that we definitely saw increased walking and riding in adjacent streets. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. Yeah, fantastic.
We felt the same.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
And I would encourage people to have a look at that Austroads presentation, which is on their website, that goes through that evaluation in a lot more detail.
Right. We'll see if we can hunt that down and we'll share that if we can. There's no more questions, but we're getting close to running out of time. So I might, if there's no final questions before I hand back to Kel.
Oh, there's a gent, Peter.
I didn't see, sorry, I can't see a hand up. But if there's
Sorry,
Peter,
Peter. I was trying to do it digitally and just couldn't click on the right button, I think. So. Just to sort of make the most of the opportunity here, I suppose I'll ask a question more about greenfields sort of development, or make a general comment, the frustration I've sort of come across over the last few years. I'm thinking of a greenfields development on a fairly steep topography, and there was a real sort of unwillingness from the planning consultants and the developer early on to sort of make any changes to road alignment, and even the civil designer to make changes to intersection geometry to to basically improve the grades to make the whole development more accessible to cyclists and to pedestrians. And I couldn't seem to get much support from anyone to sort of push them a bit harder to do some of that work. I just wonder what other people's experiences are in that space, and whether anyone's had real success in a similar situation.
Yeah, look, I think you'll find it's probably similar here in WA, and the reason why I'm suggesting that is we've now, by the end of this year, there's going to be a new state planning policy based on the Livable Neighbourhoods guidance, which has been in WA for, goodness, at least 15 years, if not more. And it's been under review for quite a lot of that time. But the good news is there's going to be some state planning policy associated with it. The other thing associated with it is going to be urban street guidance coming from main roads, as in, we know it's a local government domain, but they are providing that official guidance with their stamp on it. So I think there has been a void, and these two things will help to address some of that. The only other thing is and you'll probably find this as well, is where we've had wins, it's come down to local champions, as in champions inside, main roads, or champions in the community, dedicating their time and resources to, advocate and make those changes and to think outside the square and to suggest innovation. And we know that they're a rare find. But that's where I just think, collaborating on some of these networks. I know Cycling Walking Australia New Zealand has a design working group. There's different groups around there, and I think, keeping connected to those it will help as well.
Thanks, Michelle. Pete, I'll just say before I head back to Kel, because you're from Warrnambool, I was at Warrnambool in my first couple of years of primary school, and we lived on a little farm just outside Warrnambool up Mortlake Road. And you mightn't have been talking about Mortlake Road, but as a kid, I used to think that hill was massive walking from down the bottom up the top. That's what I thought was probably not Mortlake Road you were talking about, but as a 5-year-old, it was a couple of miles up the hill and out of town to the farm. But anyhow, that gave me a laugh, so thanks for that. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to now pass back to Kelly to formal thanks and close the event. Thank you, Kel.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks so much, Michelle. Some challenging moments through that for
I'm
you.
so sorry.
No, it's the joy when you have lots of wonderful graphics and illustrations and lots of slides that sometimes it doesn't happen. But you managed to still speak to us for over an hour with under difficult time. So thank you very much for doing that, even though you did struggle with your slides. Look, I'd also wanted to thank you for your openness and your willingness to share. Often people in your position are not as willing to open up and talk about your experiences, and not just all the positives of what's happening, but things that are not gone so well. And from someone who's also from a public health background myself, I totally acknowledge and appreciated your speaking about evaluation. And I think that that's often something that's not picked up, and particularly the qualitative and quantitative. And I think Jane did have a question in the chat that we didn't pick up on, which was really about the emphasis in your team. And I think that they're looking at the behaviour change and the built environment, and both pieces seem to be of equal value, is really refreshing as well. I don't think we've got time to answer the question, which was really about how did you get to that point of having them both seen as very valued parts of what you do. But I think that was really great. And just to giving us a very quick snapshot of all the things that you're doing. I do love the town team movement idea as well. And I think thanks to Erica and the team who've been madly adding all the links as you've been speaking, it's just suddenly they're appearing. So there's lots of things for our participants tonight to download, have a look at, reflect, rethink, and check out the websites and the reports and things that you have mentioned tonight. So lots of things that you've given us. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody else has, because they're still online, and it is a minute to 6 o'clock here at night. So thank you again for your time and for your generosity in all the things that you've shared with us today. And there's lots of great comments coming through on the chat for you as well. So thank you. And thank you to everybody for participating tonight and for listening. And yes, make use of those links that have come into the chat before we sign off. And I look forward to seeing you at our next supporter event, if not sooner. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.